I did want to speak about something real quick because some of my fellow Jewish leftists have really been disappointing me. Because you're hanging on to this premise that Jews need their own theocratic ethnostate. No one gets a theocratic ethnostate. We live in a diverse, heterogeneous world where human beings have been moving across it all over the place for many, many tens of thousands of years. And I get why you think this, because we are fed this from birth and ritually reminded of it every year as part of our religion, that we have suffered so much and that we need a homeland. But it's just ahistorical to think that Jews have suffered in some unique and special way that makes them entitled to a theocratic ethnostate. Unfortunately, genocide is a dime a dozen in this world. Even looking at European history. Yeah, I mean, the Christians really put a target on the Jews' back for a good 1,700-ish years there, give or take. But as bad as Jews had it, Romani's had it worse, just about everywhere. So where's their theocratic ethnostate? Who are we going to kick off their land at gunpoint to give Romanis a homeland? Jews, at least we got to have shtetls. I mean, sure, they were, targeted for massacres occasionally, but the Romanis weren't even allowed to sit down, let alone being held as chattel slaves in Romania for 500 years. And just look around the world. Look at Black people in the Americas. Look at indigenous people all over the planet. They've all been enslaved and genocided by Christo-fascist colonizers. So our suffering just isn't that special. And the only reason that the UK and the US went along, touted that line and gave us an army was because they didn't want Jews in their countries after World War II. And they said, oh shit, we can send all these Jews to a desert where the indigenous people there have no standing army to defend themselves with and no modern military technology. And then we get an economic and military foothold in the Middle East that will always be beholden to us. Yeah, the UK and the US thought that was a pretty sweet deal after World War II. And y'all are leftists. I'm talking about Jewish leftists. Everyone gets a place to live and everyone gets equal rights where they live. So that means no theocratic ethnostates, anywhere, for anyone. That's just kind of how it's got to be. And if you're carving out an exception for Jews just because you're Jewish, then you have no ideological integrity. So we need to think that one through a second time, folks.
So I've never met someone who I would describe as leftist. Maybe they would. I feel like this, I've heard this from liberals, but you've actually heard this from self-avowed leftists.
So you have to remember this was October, and I'm happy to report that was a shadow reply to an actual singular person who has since become they figured it out. That content creator figured it out.
It's about this around this early. Okay, got it.
Yeah, but this was really early days, right after October 7th, and it was a Jewish leftist saying, look, I support Palestine. I hate the occupation, but also Jews need a homeland to be safe. Right. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that going on, even among leftists and progressives. Yeah. There was a lot of that going on in October, November, December 2023. It took a while for us to all get on the same level. So, and of course, there's many liberals and such that are still not on that level. Right. But yeah, one thing I want to correct that was ignorant in that video was send them all to a desert. Of course, Palestine is not a desert. There are parts of Palestine that have an arid climate, but yes, I remember getting some backlash about that.
Right. I mean, I took it that you were saying it not literally, but that you were kind of mocking propaganda,
I think that's kind of what I meant.
That's desert bloom. But yes, I could see how someone.
That's what Balfour would be thinking. Oh, send them to the desert.
Right. Yeah. That's such an important point because, when people say, look, and I even recently believed this way past the point of, I used to be non-Zionist, then I was anti-Zionist, but even still being an anti-Zionist, I'll just say more recently than I'd like to admit, I thought that that the government Western government supported Israel because they felt guilty about the Holocaust. And it's wait, if they felt guilty about the Holocaust, first of all, they would have been letting people in during the Holocaust, but certainly they would have been letting them in after, right? Mm-hmm. In 1948, that's when they supposedly learned the lesson of never again. And we're going to never let this happen to people again. Okay, so if that's true, then you let them in to your fucking countries. And I think this is often the case, right? There's a difference between the masses and the elites. And so obviously, I think that probably they got buy-in from people by saying, either implicitly or explicitly, we fucked up by letting this thing happen. They deserve a homeland. versus the people who were in power who didn't think that at all. They just wanted a foothold, like you said, in that area, and they also didn't want to have to deal with these people themselves. So I think that is a really important point, and it does explain, I think, a lot, because even like critics of Israel, I think sometimes don't get the geostrategic setting of the building of the state, right? They think that it's bad that it happened, it shouldn't have happened, but people were just trying to do the right thing and got carried away. And no, that really wasn't it at all.
I think
Um,
yeah, I think that video was important too, just like for introducing the term theocratic
yeah,
ethnostate to associate with Israel.
yeah,
Because I think we all were just like weirdly normalized to the idea that there would be a Jewish homeland where
right,
Jews have rights and other people don't. Like
right, yeah,
only Jews get to vote fully.
yeah,
Um, what is that? That's apartheid, you know? But for some reason, we were making a special carve out, the whole progressive except Israel thing
right,
was and remains so entrenched in our culture.
yeah,
But yeah, it is both theocratic and an ethnostate because Zionism treats Judaism as both a religion and a race and an ethnicity, depending on what is most convenient to it at the time.
right. I did want to ask what you're working on now in terms of fundraising for Gaza and anything else that's happening now that you want to speak to that's happening in Gaza right now as we speak, basically.
Yeah, so the main thing I do with my social media channel these days is fundraisers. I'm continuing to spread education, but I try to always kind of tack on a message to fundraise for families in Gaza. Right now, the moment that we're in, I know some people, it's been 2 years, some people have gotten donation fatigue, but Shana Tova, it's Rosh Hashanah right now. It's the new year. It's a time to recommit. It's a time to give heartily if you're Jewish or anyone. And I think the need has almost never been so urgent as it is right now in Gaza City because of the invasion, the Israeli invasion of Gaza City. There's like a million people, there's hundreds of thousands of people needing to move from the north to the south. There's very limited vehicles and gasoline to do that. And so the cost of just moving south, if you have children, elderly family members, a disability, and you need a vehicle to take you south, it's $1,000 to $1,500 a ride. And then tents once they get to the south. I don't think people understand Israel actually sells some goods within Gaza at highly extortionary prices. And so tents are available for purchase in Gaza, but at again $1,000 to $1,500 a pop. So I've been working with an organization called Among the Rebel. Just over the past 3 days, we had an enormous response. We raised $30,000, which was enough to send funds to 10 families to be able to evacuate from north to south. And actually, one of them was one of the dads who wrote at the end of this book. I have
Wow.
some notes from people I fundraised for who were postpartum or prepartum during the genocide. So his baby Elena is now a year and a half old. She's lived her whole life through a genocide. They had been able to return to their home in the north that had been still standing, but now because of the invasion, they had to move south. They're unfortunately in a tent in the south, but we were able to send them the funds so they could get away from the tanks and get a tent.